One of the best things about TV is that the audience is able to spend years and years getting to know the central characters, allowing viewers to forge deeper emotional connections with them. It's why I've been obsessed with Terry McGinnis for the past 25 years, so yeah, that hypothesis rings true. And it's not uncommon for TV series to introduce initially villainous or troubling characters who are, over the course of a show's run, eventually redeemed. But this can often blow up in all sorts of big and messy ways. So, I'm Ewan, this is What Culture, and here are 10 redeemed TV characters who didn't deserve it. Number 10. Teabag, Prison Break. There's no denying that Robert Knepper's Teabag is one of Prison Break's most memorable characters, and his performance in the role is so damn entertaining that the writers evidently felt they could redeem the guy. But make no mistake, Teabag isn't merely a violent criminal. He's a rapist who's also implied to be both a pedophile and a necrophiliac, 3 characteristics which should probably put redemption out of reach. And yet, in the show's 4th season, Teabag began to demonstrate remorse for his unforgivable past and start shying away from violent acts. Even though he remains in prison by the end of the show, there was a concerted effort to soften Teabag as a character and make his brutal history something of a distant memory. Basically, the writers realized they wrote themselves into a corner by tethering such a charming character to such a nauseating rap sheet, and so just stopped bringing it up. Number 9. Angela Martin, The Office. The Office's Angela Martin, played by Angela Kinsey, is the single most unlikable main character working at Dunder Mifflin, a cold, judgmental person with a string of unconscionable moral crimes to her name. These include the hypocrisy of cheating on several partners while professing to be a devout Christian, falsely telling Dwight he wasn't the father of her child, and worst of all, straight up plotting to have Oscar killed. She is literally a terror. Dear God. And also, I hadn't gotten to that bit yet. That feels like a big escalation for her character. Either way, despite all this and the general disdain with which she treats mostly everyone, Angela gets a redemption arc in the series' final few episodes, where her character's caustic nature is suddenly blatantly undone, and she even marries Dwight in the finale, in turn receiving a blissfully happy ending. It feels like a huge cop-out though, an abrupt 180 for someone who we were all probably rooting for being killed in a horrific house cat-related accident or something. Ultimately, Angela was lucky to be tethered to one of the show's most popular characters, where Dwight's happy ending required Angela's to also be happy. But let's be honest, Dwight also just deserved better. Number 8. Lionel Luther, Smallville. Lionel Luther, played by John Glover, who you may also remember as hilarious "I'm afraid you'll have to die" from Batman and Robin, as well as Riddler in Batman the Animated Series, was one of Smallville's standout characters. The velvet-voiced, relentlessly scheming father of Michael Rosenbaum's Lex, Lionel proved a sheer joy to watch thanks to Glover's superb performance in the role. Lionel becomes increasingly villainous throughout the show's first few seasons, most egregiously attempting to have Chloe, Allison Mack, killed, forcing electroshock therapy on Lex, making concerted attempts to reveal Clark's secrets, and when he becomes terminally ill, even attempting to swap bodies with his son. Oh, it seems oddly prophetic now that we have that weird billionaire blood swap guy. Anyway, let's not forget that the guy had his own parents murdered too, so he could use the insurance money to fund his company, Luther Corp, which does not roll off the tongue anywhere near as good as LexCorp, so good going there, Lexi. And yet, as the show went on, Lionel became a more quote-unquote heroic character, the Kryptonian AI Jor-El guiding him to help Clark conceal his true identity. It's later revealed that he even formed a secret society in the past called Veritas to protect Clark, and eventually goes to his grave in order to keep Clark's truth a secret. Look, John Glover is so terrific in the role that you want to buy Lionel's redemption, but the sheer scope and extent of his wrongdoing still makes it an extremely tough sell. Number 7. Emperor Philipa Georgu, Star Trek Discovery. After the original Philipa Georgu, Michelle Yeoh is killed in Star Trek Discovery's first season, her mirror universe equivalent is swiftly introduced. And to be blunt, Emperor Georgu is basically space Hitler. She's shown to be responsible for the murder and enslavement of billions, which really makes her far more beyond redemption than any other character on this list, come to think about it. But Georgu is eventually brought over to the Prime Universe and even joins Section 31, becoming an ally to the Federation while her fascistic past is increasingly just swept under the rug. It's certainly a testament to the persuasive power of Michelle Yeoh's performance that this is possible at all, but all the same, it's extremely difficult to reconcile the notion of such an epic tyrant being given a fresh start, even accepting the unique circumstances of her arrival in the Prime Universe. That a genocidal maniac is just walking around, living their best life and enjoying a journey of self-betterment is completely ridiculous. Maybe this is why Star Wars just killed these guys off after they made a heroic comeback? Less questions to have that way. Number 6. Nate Shelly, Ted Lasso. Ted Lasso's second season shockingly ended by positioning Ted's loyal kitman Nate Shelly, played by Nick Mohammed, as a villain when he jumped ship to be head coach at West Ham after feeling underappreciated at AFC Richmond. Fans quite reasonably expected the show's third and apparently final season to fashion an emotional redemption arc for Nate, which would see him likely return to Richmond and immediately reconcile with Jason Sudeikis' Ted. And while Nate does indeed come back to Richmond and make things right with Ted, it doesn't feel earned because so much of Nate's arc during the season was focused on his wildly implausible relationship with restaurant hostess Jade. So much of Nate's emotional development just occurred off screen, such as him telling West Ham owner Rupert to go do one, and we as viewers were simply left to believe it. This ensured that the potentially fist-pumping high of seeing him make amends, one of the big emotional pillars of the entire season even, fell disappointingly flat like a deflated ball. Number 5. Sylar, Heroes. Zachary Quinto's Sylar was introduced as the primary villain of Heroes' first season, a superhuman serial killer with a tendency to murder other supers in order to steal their powers. Yet, subsequent seasons made concerted efforts to plane the edges off Sylar, painting him in a more sympathetic light as he attempts to stop killing and become a more heroic character, albeit with some notable relapses. These things happen. By the end of the show, however, Sylar becomes bros with Peter Petrelli, despite murdering his brother, and even has the gall to call himself a hero. Look, even if you accept that Sylar truly wanted to change his ways, it's kind of laughable to consider him a hero given that his past is defined by killing people and examining their brains in order to absorb their powers. I'm not an atonement expert, but there's probably no atoning for that, and certainly not in the manner depicted in the show. Number 4. Nancy Botwin, Weeds. Weeds protagonist Nancy Botwin, played by Mary Louise Parker, certainly started out the series as a sympathetic enough character, a recently bereaved mother who begins selling pot to support herself and her 2 children, but over the course of the show, Nancy's actions become increasingly stupidly risky and prove almost cartoonishly narcissistic at times. Rather than simply scaling back her lifestyle and working a regular job, Nancy jumps into the drug game with both feet, resulting in her family being endangered as they end up trapped in the middle of a drug turf war and DEA investigation. Despite Nancy most often being the cause of her own problems, she rarely takes ownership of this or the impact her life choices have clearly had on her sons. As such, Weeds mutated into something that many fans only hate-watched in its final few seasons, as Nancy devolved into a selfish caricature of her former self. A series finale which paid that off would have been tremendously satisfying, and yet creator Genji Cohen instead opted for a more sentimental wrap-up in which Nancy is now operating several lucrative and legal weed dispensaries and basically decides to forgive herself for all that past wrongdoing. The show let Nancy off too easily in the end, and after 8 seasons of watching her be increasingly awful, it all just rang a bit false. Number 3. Lynn McGill, 24. Throughout its run, 24 certainly loved redeeming easy-to-loathe stuffed shirts, with George Mason, played by Xander Berkeley, and Brian Chappelle, Paul Schultz, both sacrificing themselves in meaningful ways which left fans with a favourable departing impression of them. Oh man, that bit with Mason in the plane, just that stayed with me forever. Season 5's Lynn McGill, though? Not so much. Which is saying something, given this is the face of Samwise Gamgee we're talking about here. Sean Astin's McGill was a high-ranking division official who arrives at counter-terrorist unit CTU to oversee the Sentox nerve gas crisis. And beyond being a typical feckless guy who opposes Jack Bauer, he makes one major unforgivable screw-up. During the season, Lynn's CTU keycard is stolen by his sister, whose boyfriend promptly sells it to terrorists, allowing them to gain entry to CTU and release one of the nerve gas canisters, causing the deaths of more than 50 employees, including fan-favorite character Edgar Stiles. Lynn's failure to report the theft out of embarrassment cost a ton of lives, and the show subsequently attempts to redeem him by having him heroically enter a contaminated area in order to activate CTU's ventilation system, thereby causing his death. Except this sacrifice felt considerably less redeeming than those of Mason's and Chappelle's, given that McGill's stupidity caused the deaths of so many to begin with. Laying down his life to save the rest of the building was basically the bare minimum he could have done in this situation, which was just stupidly avoidable. Number 2. Negan, The Walking Dead. The Walking Dead's Negan, Jeffrey Dean Morgan, is one of the most detestable villains in TV history, a fact cemented instantly by him brutally beating fan-favorite character Glenn, Stephen Yeun, to death after being introduced. While Negan is a thoroughly entertaining character all the same, in large part due to Dean Morgan's infectiously charismatic performance, later seasons saw him transform into something of an anti-hero, and it's never once felt even remotely earned. A big part of the problem is that The Walking Dead isn't terribly keen to remember Negan's horrific past, and would rather fans simply accept that he's better now just because. All the same, it's ridiculous seeing him teaming up with Glenn's bereaved partner Maggie, given what he did. This isn't to ignore his many other sins either, nor the utter delight he consistently took in victimizing anyone he could. Look, sometimes characters just do things that are too heinous to forgive, and that's okay. For the show to pretend otherwise, though, is really jarring. And number 1, Barney Stinson, How I Met Your Mother. How I Met Your Mother's Barney Stinson, an iconic Neil Patrick Harris, is undeniably one of the most, say the line, Bart, legendary sitcom characters of all time. Look, you happy now? The reason why we can call it legendary is because of Neil Patrick Harris's pitch-perfect performance as a prolific womanizer who, let's be honest, is a total a-hole. Even if his obnoxiously brash personality and general misogyny aren't enough to write him off, remember that Barney straight up admitted that he probably sold a woman once. Emphasis on probably there, but probably something you'd want to be definitive about if it came up, right? And yet, Barney received an extremely hurried redemption arc, if you can even call it an arc, in the show's series finale, where it's revealed that one of his one-night stands has fallen pregnant and promptly given birth to a baby girl called Ellie. All it takes for Barney to abandon his vacuous player lifestyle is one look at his daughter, after which he apparently becomes a devoted father forevermore. But it's just too sudden and rushed to be believable or remotely satisfying, even if this is far from the most egregious sin committed by that final episode.